Hi guys, Olive here today to bring you the next edition of my unhinged author name reading challenge, except this time things did not go the way I expected. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, back in November I randomly got this idea to read only books written by men named Jason. It was just a silly idea, but it turned out fantastically. It gave me a whole bunch of books that I really enjoyed. So I decided I wanted to do it again, and why not pick another J name? So I picked the name Janet. And that also turned out pretty decently. It wasn't quite as successful as the Jason Project, but it did give me a favorite novel of the year. So naturally, I wanted to keep the momentum going. I wanted to keep the J name train rolling forward. This time I chose the name Julia. And well, I'll tell you about the books and you can see how it went. Like I did in the previous two videos, I'm going to start off by talking about the worst book in the bunch. I'll move my way up to talking about the best book as we go along, but that means we're starting with The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. This is a thriller. It stars an aspiring writer named Alex. She has been estranged from her former best friend, Ren, for about a year now. They haven't spoken since an incident happened between them, until they are both invited to this very exclusive writer's retreat hosted by their shared favorite author. It's what they bonded over in the first place, at her rumored to be haunted mansion out in the middle of nowhere. Alex and Ren and the small handful of other writers who were also invited to this retreat are all expected to crank out an entire novel in the month that they are going to be spending at this retreat. And the tension in the air isn't just because of the weird energy between these two former best friends. The guru, Rosa, is into mind games. She's also into brutal feedback during the writing process, and there's also something occult adjacent happening on this property. Weird dreams, strange visions, bad vibes. On paper, that premise was like catnip for me. It's spooky, it's atmospheric, it's got writers as main characters. Sign me up. And early on, aside from the main character Alex acting like a kicked puppy through most of the book, I was moderately entertained. I was along for the ride. But I realized I was no longer having fun when I picked up on the fact that everything in this book has a sexual undertone. I am not even exaggerating. A character can't hear a noise in the middle of the night. It has to be a sexual noise. Two characters can't just have tension with one another. They must want each other. Someone had a disturbing dream? No, they had a sexual dream. It happened so much that I started to feel like I was being invited into some personal proclivities the author may have. Ma'am, that is a party you can exclude me from. I do not need to be invited to all of that. Tone it down. That's coming from a Scorpio. Plot-wise, too, I felt like it went in the dumbest possible direction. There were so many hints given early on at what the big reveals were going to be later that I was able to guess what those were going to be very, very early into the reading experience, which I don't think is very fun. I don't think it was necessarily terribly written, but it was terribly plotted. And I was genuinely shocked to see how high of an average rating this has on Goodreads. I mean, I'm happy for everyone out there who liked it. Clearly it worked for some people, but it did not work for me. This is not at all what I wanted out of a wintry thriller. Let's move on. Although we're not going very far because the next book is also a thriller centered on a fractured female friendship. It's called Black-Eyed Susans by Julia Heberlin. This one takes place both immediately after and 2 decades after an attack by a serial killer in the 1990s. A group of young girls were targeted by this killer and only one survived. That survivor grows up to be our main character in this book. Her name is Tessa. And ever since she was found alive, she has not been able to escape this case. Even as an adult with a teenage daughter of her own, she cannot escape the public attention surrounding this case, especially in the moment that we meet her, because the man who was convicted of that crime is set to be executed. But there is a legal team working hard seeking his exoneration because they have long believed him to be innocent. Oh, and every so often, someone, we don't know who, is planting black-eyed Susans in Tessa's yard. And this is significant because the field in which Tessa was found alive and the rest of the victims were found, that field was covered in black-eyed Susans. Ever since, the media has dubbed Tessa and the remaining victims the Black-Eyed Susans. So the flowers seem like some sort of a threat. We bounce back and forth in time between the 1990s and the present day. Back in the 90s, we see Tessa just after the attack, trying to figure out how to go on with her life. She is seeking therapy, she's spending a lot of time with her best friend Lydia, but then we also spend a good amount of time with present-day Tessa, who is still, all of these years later, trying to piece together what exactly happened. And she's also trying to figure out what happened to her best friend Lydia, who disappeared years ago. I thought the writing was decent. I was actually pretty invested for most of this book until I realized how far in I was and how little had actually happened up until that point. Pacing was off. It was definitely the Achilles heel of this book. And then we also got to peek at some trial transcripts toward the end, and they read to me as far-fetched, to put it kindly. The conclusion was also wild, and I feel like it came out of nowhere. If the author had properly built up to it and then given it some breathing room afterward, like give us some time for the dust to settle to see how everything turns out after something that crazy happens, I think I would have liked this book more. But instead, everything was crammed into the last 30 or 40 pages, and that's just not how it's supposed to be paced. What's extra sad about this is that this is actually the book that inspired the whole Julia experiment. I had picked this one because fairly recently I just got a Black-Eyed Susan tattoo. I got it to celebrate the physical transformation I underwent, and part of the reason I chose Black-Eyed Susans is because of something that the main character Tessa notes very early on in the book. They're one of the wildflowers that will pop up first after a fire has ripped through an area. So to me, that means that they can represent resilience and new life. So it was rather unfortunate that in this book, they are a much darker symbol. They're essentially a stand-in for this character's trauma. My shoulder would terrify this woman. Be prepared for a bit of a tone shift, because next I'm going to talk about a book called Threads: The Delicate Life of John Krask by Julia Blackburn, which is honestly a very difficult book to describe. Essentially, this is a very eccentric biography memoir hybrid about this British fisherman turned artist named John Krask, who, while chronically ill and largely confined to his bed, created these incredibly detailed and beautiful paintings and embroideries of ocean scenes entirely from memory. But then at the exact same time, it's also Julia Blackburn's story of creating this book. Her story of researching it and writing it, all of her travels, her interviews, her own personal grief, and then also randomly stories about Einstein. Some sections worked beautifully. I thought that Julia Blackburn's reflections on losing her own husband were incredibly moving, and I think they allowed her to connect more deeply with the memory of John Krask's wife, Laura, who spent most of her life caring for her sick husband. But then other parts of this book felt like filler. The Einstein sections did not need to be there. Full stop. If I had been given the red pen, I would have scratched all of those out, because I am firmly of the opinion that if something isn't adding to a book, it's subtracting. And I still couldn't tell you, besides location, what Einstein had in common with John Krask. I think with a tighter focus, and had Julia Blackburn leaned into drawing parallels between her life and her marriage with her husband and the life of John and Laura Krask, I think this could have gone from something decent to something magnificent. All of that being said, though, the art in here is stunning. I caught myself several times with the book inches away from my face. I was just studying all the details, blown away by how he, without any art training, could create these gorgeous works of art. I think it also added to my overall reading experience that I got this from interlibrary loan. It was absolutely impossible to track down, and I did not want to pay full price for it. So I took advantage of interlibrary loan, and the copy that I read came from the Boston Public Library. And I was so tickled by that because I have visited the BPL, but obviously I'm not a Bostonian, so I was not allowed to check anything out. So being able to read something from their collection, I was just delighted. I don't know if anybody besides me would be charmed by that, but I definitely was. The next Julia up is Julia Glass. I read her book 3 Junes, which actually won the National Book Award back in 2002. This is essentially 3 interconnected short stories centered on this Scottish family, the MacLeods, and spanning roughly from 1989 to 1999. We begin with the widowed patriarch Paul as he's traveling through Greece. Then we move on to the much longer second section that stars one of the sons of the family, Fenno, who is living in New York during the AIDS crisis, but we also see him go home to address some family matters as well. And then finally, in the third section, different threads and characters are brought together. The middle chunk of this book, that middle section, was easily the strongest part of this book. Like, it's not even a question. And from what I read on the dust jacket, it seems like she wrote that middle section first, like it existed as a novella by itself. And then she added on the other 2 parts to expand this into a full-length novel. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure she needed to do that. The first section I was barely interested in. I almost put the book down. The second section did pull me in, but then by the time the third section came around, I was ready for the book to be done. So why not just leave this as the novella if that's the good part? I know I've mentioned this before. I even discussed it in the Janet video I made not long ago, but I tend to struggle with character-driven novels that don't have a lot of plot going on. I enjoy good characters, and I really like the ones in this one. They felt like flesh and blood people, complicated, interesting. I liked getting to know them, so that wasn't a problem. It's just that I wanted a little bit more oomph from the plot than this author had any intention of giving me. I know this style of book works for a lot of readers out there, and honestly, I'm very jealous. I wish it could be my kind of thing, but it's just not. I have 2 more Julias to talk about in this video. One of them is Julia Corbett, who wrote a book called Out of the Woods, Seeing Nature in the Everyday. This is an essay collection about the sometimes overlooked ways that humans interact with nature in our everyday lives, and the topics really run the gamut. Wildlife encounters, yard care, insects, noise pollution. One even opens up in a shopping mall, which immediately caught my attention since I did that very fun 2 books about shopping malls video a while back. The topics of the essays may be all over the place, but what the essays all do have in common is that tonally they are very contemplative. And the author does frequently weave in elements of her life in Salt Lake City, Utah, so the book does frequently flirt with being a memoir as well. Throughout the entire book, I found myself nodding in agreement with her central thesis that we as humans see ourselves as being very disconnected from the natural world. Like, there's the human world and then there's nature, and they're not at all connected, when really those 2 things are inextricably linked. We are a part of nature, even if we don't see ourselves that way. The problem I had with this book was actually a me problem. By this point in my reading life, I have read so much nature writing. So a lot of the topics in here I've already read about, I've already thought about. It was very solid, but it was never going to be particularly new or revelatory to me personally just because of where I'm at as a reader. So I thought it was good. It just found me a little bit too late in my reading life. But finally, we do have a winner. The Julia book that I enjoyed the most out of all of these was Come Fly the World, the jet age story of the women of Pan Am by Julia Cook, which I gave 4 stars. It is a keyhole history of the airline Pan Am's stewardesses beginning in 1966. We follow several women through the glamorous but demanding early jet age. Yes, Pan Am had some ridiculous hiring standards. Let's be clear about that. But they were also offering women an, at the time, rare opportunity to travel the world and build dynamic careers for themselves. And we follow several stewardesses who actually worked for Pan Am. We see them at the time of their hiring. We learn about all their different work experiences and also the broader cultural shifts that were happening at that time. For several of the women profiled in this book, their work began to overlap with the Vietnam War that was happening at the time. And so at a certain point in the book, the narrative becomes heavily focused on Pan Am's role in a mission to evacuate children from the region. I understood why that was included because the women played a part in that mission. It's part of their story. This book is about their stories. But it began to dominate the back half of this book so much that it almost felt like this was morphing into an entirely different book. That said, I still really enjoyed this. I found that it vividly captured the feeling of this era and brought it to life. It felt like I was living this, and that is exactly what I want from this kind of a narrative history. So, a 4-star book is the highest I could achieve in this Julia project. I read 6 books. One of them was 4 stars. The rest were 3 and below. And honestly, that kind of tracks with how this year has been going for me thus far. 2026 doesn't seem to like me very much. Maybe that'll improve, but I don't know. So if your name is Julia, defend yourself in the comments, I guess. I'm kidding. My apologies to the Julias of the world. I wanted to love these. I swear it. But I'm not giving up on the author name challenges. I'm not even going to give up on the J names. I'm just going to say this is a fluke and hope for better results. I'll take a little break, dust myself off, and try again with my fingers crossed that it goes better next time. So let me know in the comments below what J name you think I should take on next. Which one is going to bring me better luck than the name Julia? I want to hear all your suggestions. I also want to hear any of your thoughts on any of the books I spoke about today. If you have read them, even if you want to read them, you might still like them, even if I didn't. So let me know any or all of that down below. All of the books I did speak about today will be listed and linked for you in the description box below. And at the very bottom of the exact same description box, you will also see links to everywhere you can find me around the internets, like Instagram, Goodreads, the Story Graph, all the places I'm the most active, in case you want to keep up with what I am reading and doing right now. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.